let's kick off first. So, Kristen, I will direct the first question to you, which is how do you define vulnerability both personally as well as within the workplace?
Thank you. And yes, thanks for having us, Red. I'm so excited to chat with you and the rest of the group. For me, vulnerability, both in personal life and at work, is really the ability to name my needs, to define my limitations, to be honest and transparent about when I need help, when I made a mistake, right? Like that acknowledgement of I'm a human being too. So that can have a lot of different ways of how I express that, but it comes down to that honesty with myself first and then with the people around me before misunderstandings happen.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, mistakes do happen. I think we all, like you just say, are humans. And so that's so important for us to just be comfortable to admit. So yeah, Rhett, over to you. How do you define vulnerability personally and in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here with everyone. Thank you for all the grand ambassadors that are joining us on World Mental Health Day. And for me, when I think about it on a personal level, at its core, it's really the ability to embrace uncertainty and risk and to provide emotional exposure. And that can be really challenging because it's not something that we're taught at a very early age. And when I think about it in the workplace setting, it's about bringing authenticity to work every day. And it says that you should bring your full self to work, but that's a really difficult thing to do. And you can't bring your full self to work, but you can bring your full self to interactions that you have with people. Whether you are sharing about your challenges, admitting mistakes, and understanding that you don't have all the answers, but ultimately welcoming the perspective of others. That's what vulnerability looks like from a leadership standpoint when you're at the workplace, so you can help your teams thrive.
I actually love the distinction that you make, authentic versus the full self. It's not always possible and also not always healthy to be your full self. If I'm having a bad day and the only thing I want to cry, bringing that full self to a workspace for my team will not be the best thing to do. But I can be authentic. I can definitely say, I'm not having a good day. Bear with me today. Be more patient. Or I'm not in a good mindset today to show up as my best self. Let me take the day off, right? So I really love, Red, that you make that distinction.
Thank you. Absolutely. It's all about being able to feel connected, to stay engaged, and it's about showing up with different interactions where it allows you to be authentic. And for some people, you can be your full self, but the entire workplace can't handle all of our full selves, but it can handle specific interactions, and it makes the workplace better.
100%.
With that, actually, when do you both say that it would be a safe space or the proper moment to bring your full self? And like maybe perhaps with who? Like, for example, like with my close colleagues, I'd probably be a bit more comfortable bringing my full self. But when I'm speaking to maybe my leaders, like executive team, I definitely have to keep a little bit more reserved for sure. But even with my manager, like, is it okay for me to bring my full self with her? Is it not? So that kind of like leans into like, I think a question we're going to get to later on the call, but when would you both say that it's like good to be your full self or yeah, is there specific practices that we should keep in mind for that?
Kirsten, you want to jump in with that?
You go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say absolutely when it comes to your colleagues and the people that you're interacting with most often, so your contemporaries, it's important to foster that sort of relationship because it fosters connection and belonging. And it makes the working environment so much better. When you are dealing with the C-suite or executive leaders, you may need to pull back on your full self. You can show up authentically. You can advocate for yourself. You can speak about things that matter. I think it's really important to have a close-knit relationship with your manager. When we think about their 168 hours in a week, and most of us are spending a third of those at work, especially interacting with someone that is the arbiter of your performance, they need to know the ways in which you're showing up each day. And it's okay to be authentic and to say that, hey, I'm having maybe not the best day, or there are personal things happening in my life, or you know what, I'm ready to receive and to interact and to grow and to be challenged. So maybe not as much with the C-suite unless you're cultivating those relationships. I think definitely with your manager, so they can know what's going on and the ways in which they can support you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would really encourage to foster a relationship with your manager where you can show up as your full self, especially in one-on-one interactions, right? Like this, it's also really depending on the situation and the context in which you want to or need to show up as your full self. And understanding, having that self-awareness and social awareness of making that good judgment call. But one-on-one meetings, if there is an issue in you showing up as your full self with your manager, I would say that's a deeper conversation to have. That's where do you need to build the trust, and where does your manager need to foster the trust and build a safe space for you to show up as your full self. And that's definitely the area where I am most of the time my full self, where I can cry when I'm in a one-on-one. I can say I am so frustrated and I need to let this out. Why? Because I trust that my manager has the skill set and has built the um, yeah, like the ability to manage my emotions and then coach me through the challenge that led me to have those emotions. And not everybody has that. So if your manager doesn't have that, there are different ways you can go about coaching up or expressing your needs, which is also vulnerability. But yeah, I agree to everything else that Red said about find your space within the workspace, the colleagues that you interact with, and then find also the good balance of, is this a good moment to be my full self, or should I be the authentic self?
I like that comparison. And like, let's be all vulnerable here. Feel free to put in the chat if you cried one-on-one with your manager, because I will be the first to admit that I certainly have. So I think we're all there. We do have one question from Omer here, who's asking, how are you balancing sharing yourself with how it might affect their view of you and your performance? Like, how do you protect that so that you don't get potentially not penalized or viewed differently for being too vulnerable?
I love that question, and it's one of the most important questions to keep in mind. For me, I've learned really early on that the more honest I am about my mistakes, my downfalls, my limitations, the things I don't know, my gaps, right? The less I am being attacked, right? And it's almost like a contradiction. Like a lot of people say, like the more you admit to your mistakes or to your to your faults or whatever, the more vulnerable you become, literally. And it's like, yes, and the more you can say, hey, I don't know what to do about this, the more you will get help, right? It's admitting. And so when you put it on the table, then it is more likely that you will get support than, oh, if you don't know, then what are you doing here, right? Like that, it happens less. It may happen. That would be then a conversation about toxic workplaces, not for today. But I would say really, it is okay to show up in that honest space. And I think I lost my train of thought. Red, I'm just sending it over to you.
No, I think that's great. And Omar, thank you for your question. And I think ultimately that it's important that when you're cultivating these relationships, that conversations about toxicity happen, whether it's toxic positivity or the toxicity that we are all interested in trying to avoid at work. And ultimately, when I'm talking to my supervisor, I report directly to the CEO. I want to talk about our shared humanity because it allows me to show up and say that, hey, I am unable to do my best today because there is something on my mind, whether it is a deadline that needs to be pushed, whether it's my ability to interact with colleagues, or there are things in my personal life that are just dragging down my ability to show up as my best self. And ultimately saying that, hey, I need your support in this, but you have to be able to name it and you have to feel comfortable naming it because people in general want to help, but you have to define what helps looks like. And only you can do that, especially when you are having that relationship with your supervisor. So I wouldn't be as concerned as much about the way that they see you because you have no control over that. You'll never have any control over that. And most people are not bold enough or honest enough to tell you what they really think. So you just need to show up in a way that gets you the help and the support that you need to be your best self.
Yeah, and being comfortable with who you are, including the limitations that you bring and the opportunities, right? And it's also how you talk about yourself that will define ultimately that safe space with others and how they perceive you. And you can never show up or you can never name your challenges and your mistakes and cause a perception of you not being accountable or not approachable. So I really like the part about showing that shared humanity and get on that same, not level, but like same understanding with others. Yeah, so much truth to that.
And I think leaders will know like when you're in a time of growth, and that's really when you can be your most vulnerable. And chances are they've been through your shoes, like they are your manager because they've been through what you've been through to get to where they are. So I think not every leader is going to be compassionate. I think we have to recognize that too. But yeah, I don't think any leader should penalize you for being vulnerable, especially in a place of growth. Um, let's move on to the next question here. For some other leaders on the call, what challenges might leaders face when trying to be more vulnerable? Is there any like common misconceptions that some folks might have? Chris, we can start with you as well.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I would say I can speak from my own experience. One of the first mistakes I made in terms of vulnerability as a leader was believing that oversharing was vulnerability. And so I talked to my direct reports as if they were my friends, and I would open up and vent to them and share my frustrations with them. And I thought that was fostering trust because I thought, well, I'm just being honest, I'm being vulnerable. And I realized too late in that first instance that I was burdening, like bothering them. It was a burden to them, having to deal with my emotions, right? And it never should be that way. So I had to really learn the hard way. I could, in that instance, I didn't recover from that mistake. That the trust was so broken. I had created a weird dynamic in which they didn't know how to engage with me. And then I learned as I prepared myself further and I did coaching and received coaching and so on, that yeah, vulnerability is not about oversharing or sharing in the wrong space, right? It's also, yeah, understanding how to use emotional intelligence to have that read of the room and the audience that you have and the impact that you, like what you share, has in others. So that was one of my biggest aha moments in terms of vulnerability and one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's something that everyone goes through when you are on this management journey and dealing with people. I think a lot of times the vulnerability, there's a misconception that vulnerability somehow equates to weakness and that it will undermine your ability to have authority, to show up or to lead if you show your emotions. And that's really not what it's about. Leadership is not about displaying fragility, and that's not what vulnerability is. It's okay to show that you can be resilient, that, you know what, maybe I made a mistake. I took us in the wrong direction. And that authenticity ties into that resilience to say, you know what, though I may have made a mistake, though I should have showed up differently, here's how we're going to level set. Here's how we're going to right the ship. And just to understand that that misconception that is tied to leadership and vulnerability really is a fallacy. It is not a weakness. People are not going to respect you less because you show up in a way that's transparent and that's kind and that's humane. That's not tied to your competence. It's tied to your humanity. And to say, you know what, I should have showed up differently. Far too often things are put on a scale of better or worse. Well, it's not better or worse. It's we could do it different. And here's what I'm going to do differently, trying to support this group and to support myself.
Yeah, like really that belief that it's a weakness. I think that's one of the most harmful misconceptions of vulnerability. Just yesterday, I had an instance where I let my frustrations get the better of me, and to two of my leads, I carried myself in a harsher way than usual, and I immediately recognized it, and I saw it in their face. They were like, "Oh, something is going on," and instead of just pretending nothing happened because I'm in that power dynamic with them, I immediately said, look, I am really sorry. That wasn't kind of me. I want to hold myself to my own standards and expectations and be kind to you. And this wasn't it. I'm committed to doing better. This was not okay. And it immediately changed again the energy in the room. So it is not a weakness. Like they now can trust me that when I make a mistake that impacted them severely, they also know they can trust that I will recognize it and then commit to doing better next time, which is all there is that we can do when we make a mistake.
That's really powerful that you mentioned that. And for each of us, when you understand the anatomy of an apology and what is most meaningful to people, it is not the words that you say, it's the way that they are made to feel. People want to feel heard. They want to feel valued. They want to feel respected. And the energy that you show up to conversations with and the words that you use are all complementary to mending what could be a broken relationship. So that's really powerful that you say that.
And I also feel that it will make them understand when, like, you might be having an off day, and you know what? Off days happen. So, it seems like they seem to recognize when you might not be at your best self, and they're welcoming to that. And like you say, you're taking the ownership of recognizing that as well, which I think is, as Emma's also saying in the chat, like that is a really beautiful thing. And it doesn't come along a lot in leadership. So kudos to you for just being able to recognize when you're not at your best self, and being the first to admit it to your teams and your leads, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, that's exactly what vulnerability is about. It's like recognizing when something is going on and then being able to say, my apologies, I'm not at my best today. And then also taking it a step further and say, like, I cannot show up today. And I've had those moments when, like, no matter what I do, I tried, I won't be a good leader today, not to anybody, not to myself. And then really saying, I need to take a mental health day.
Yeah. And I think, as well as, like, there is what we all should practice is that self-compassion, because even just, again, speaking of myself, like, it takes a lot for me to call in sick or take a mental health day because of the guilt that sets in, right? So us practicing that self-compassion of just being like, you know what, I can't bring my full work self, so I am going to take that space back. And so, yeah, giving yourself the power to take that step. Moving on, because I know we're already at 10 minutes too. So can you share real life examples when showing vulnerability increased trust with your teams? Right, we can start with you first here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of us here probably work on projects or collaboratively within teams or interdepartmentally, and sometimes you face unexpected setbacks. Things will happen. People are on vacation, deadlines are missed, and there was an issue that happened at the job where I needed to admit my own oversight, and to share the disappointment that I had widely, not in the group, but in myself. Because if I'm the leader of the team, I am not being gentle with myself, which means that I wasn't being gentle with those that were working with me, trying to solve a collective problem. And for me, it's about role modeling the behavior of saying, hey, you know what? I'm juggling so many balls in the air, and I'm trying my best not to drop one, that I am providing so much undersight here and oversight in other areas that I'm not being fair. And I'm showing up in a way that isn't collaborative, it isn't supportive, and I don't want to show up as that sort of colleague, as that sort of teammate. So I want to role model what it is to first admit my mistake and to do it publicly, and then to show how we need to be gentle with each other and to ask for help in a way that is productive to moving projects forward. That happened not too long ago, and it was really amazing to see the relationships that could have been fractured be salvaged just by saying, I was wrong. I need to show up differently. I want to be gentle with myself so I can be gentle with others, and let me figure out the best way forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes,
Kristen?
thank you. Yes, I think there's so many moments, and for me, they're often not even those big moments or like a moment. It's more like those almost daily interactions that I have with my team. I just started my current job not too long ago, 4 months in, and it's peak season for us. And there's so many things I don't know. And I can choose to suffer in silence and try to figure out everything by myself. Or I can say, okay, who are the talented people around me? And there's so many always. And let me tap into their talent. Let me empower them by also saying, you know what, I don't have the answer, but I know who has. Go speak to that person, right? That kind of vulnerability also, it's very small, and maybe a lot of folks don't recognize that it's vulnerability, but it's part of the behavior that I really encourage leaders to role model. It's saying, yeah, I don't have the answer, like exactly what Red said. I don't have the answer, but I am committed to finding it for you. Or when someone has a challenge, to say, I appreciate your vulnerability. I've been through something myself like this. I can relate to you. Let me take this and advocate for you. Like there's so many instances in my day-to-day where that kind of vulnerability on both sides just fosters trust overall.
That's great. Moving on here, just because it is Mental Health Day, what are some ways that you, as a leader, protect your mental health, but also encourage that your team also protects their mental health? Is there any resources that you share? I know, again, as we talked about, it's just you being open and being vulnerable and compassionate as a leader is huge. But what are some other ways that you practice both and encourage that for your team? Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there are several different ways that I like to do it. I am a morning workout sort of person. It is a part of my mental health. It's a part of what jumpstarts my day. I am also really big, a big proponent of podcasts, and if everyone has an opportunity, you should go to actionforhappiness.com. That's actionforhappiness.com. They send monthly calendars that give you daily events that you can do to improve your mental health. They have podcasts, they have challenges, they have workbooks. Also, I have been getting more into a deeper level of understanding of meaning and life. And I've been listening to these audiobooks that have really helped to translate the way in which I'm thinking about my personal life so it can bleed into my professional life. And those have been really, really powerful ways. And finally, sometimes you do have to take a mental health day. You have to wake up and say, you know what, I even though there isn't anything particularly wrong, everything isn't right. And I need to take some time for myself. That's what I do.
I love to hear all that. Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of building resilience. So I had to really work on getting those structures and coping mechanisms in place that help me to be resilient when something tough is happening. And so it can be meditation. I also like to exercise, so that's a big part of it. I have 3 amazing doggies who I call my emotional support dogs. So when I am going through something, I also go and gravitate to them. I take them for a walk. So there's so many small things you can do, and I've done to build my like a good mental health, right? When it happens that I'm not in a good place, it's really normalizing a mental health day. I've done it in a few companies now where I'm like, all right, let's just normalize it in the same way that we normalize calling out sick when we have the flu. Like, why would we force us to work when we physically can? Why would we do it when we mentally cannot? And so really creating a safe space for my team to feel okay and not that guilt that you mentioned, Emma, about calling out sick for mental health day. In one company, we even had a quarterly like obligatory mental health day. Some may call it personal day. It doesn't always have to be about mental health, but a day in which you just take care of yourself, right? And also, like, quite often, it's creating a team structure so that you have enough capacity, so you don't overburden, like overwork people. You don't like, you create a place where there's work-life balance, because when there isn't a good work-life balance, that's when also it impacts the mental health of my team members. So those are some of the things that I've done and keep doing. In one company, we had even we started every meeting with 1-minute meditation just to ground ourselves, right? So depends on the environment, depends on the people and what you're doing. Yeah, those are some of the things that I've done and had good success with.
That's awesome. And thank you all for commenting in the chat and putting actionforhappiness.org. I love taking sound baths. There is something really relaxing about a sound bath, and you can find those on YouTube. They're absolutely free. And it's a great thing to do. And also recognizing that in the workplace, issues are going to happen. Crises are going to come and go. Things will ebb and flow. But ultimately, if any workplace can't exist without your physical presence, then there's a greater issue at play. And one of my mentors used to always joke with me about the power of PTO or taking time off. And he said, you know, a lot of times as you are taking care of yourself, I would tell my contemporaries that PTO for me means prepare the others, because I can't show up today. I have to take care of me. And our workplace has enough talented people in it that we will survive a day or a week. And I'll be able to come back and give my very best when I'm able.
I feel there's been a lot of sound nuggets this conversation that we could put on t-shirts and mugs and mouse pads and all of it. So I might be looking through the transcript and creating swag for all of you, just as a pre-warning. Uh, I just want to, we have a minute left. Is there anyone that wants to come off mute or camera and ask a question for Rhett and Kirsten as we have their knowledge here with us? If not, they are available in the Grammarly Collective, of course, for all of you. A lot of kudos. I need this sticker. I feel like the PTO is definitely going to be something. We can all put it on our laptops. But yes. Amazing. I guess one last question that I had for both of you that came up just personally is, as someone who is in an area of growth for me, or an era of growth, how do you not how do you differentiate like lack of confidence versus vulnerability? You know, like I don't want to come across as like not confident in my role, but I also do want to be vulnerable to my manager to say I might not know the answers. But again, like Omar was indicating, I don't want to get that a notch off my belt or whichever. So yeah, any insight for that, especially as managers to folks?
Yeah. Red, you want to go first?
Sure. I would just say for you, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with all of us, is that your strength lies in your openness. And it's your ability to articulate the difference between competence in a particular area and just needing support. And that understanding that any good manager, any good team wants you to ask for help because they want you to have everything you need to do it right the first time. And that confidence is a muscle, just like your biceps or your triceps. It needs to be worked. And far too often, we don't have enough practice putting it into work unless there is some major event on the horizon, or we feel like we've been backed into a corner. That confidence will grow the more that you practice it. And that strength lies in your openness and ability to ask difficult questions and be ready to hear potentially difficult answers. But it's not about tearing you down. Everything is about building you up.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And it's such a real question for so many of us. It ties a little bit to imposter syndrome, right? Where it's like, how do I foster my own growth and adopt or embrace that growth mindset without sounding or others wanting to perceive me as not confident or not skilled? And I would actually argue that it takes a lot of confidence to say, I want to grow in this area. So whenever you doubt yourself, say like, wow, here's all the skills and skill sets that I bring already to the table. Here's what I'm missing or what I'm looking for that I don't have yet. How do I close that gap? And sometimes it's really looking at maybe your resume and looking at all the projects that you do, looking at this here, right? Reminding yourself of the moments that you created community, that you helped others, and then say like, okay, just because I don't know something here, I don't have that skill set or skill yet, doesn't mean that I am not good or prepared. And so you can really build that confidence. And it's true. It is practice, and it's reminding yourself of the value and the worth that you bring inherently to the world and to the workspace.